Now, of course, the goal of this application is to fetch input from the user. But to get started, we'll hardcode some values here and will then later adjust this program to actually get values from the user. Now, in this program we want to build here, we'll need to deal with multiple different values. The principal, so the investment amount, the expected annual return, and the investment horizon. And for readability and understandability purposes, it makes sense to store these values in so-called variables, in data containers, you could say. A feature that exists in basically every programming language, which helps us store values in some container and then reference that container to use that value from any point in our code. And in Go, you create such a variable with help of the var keyword. Then you give it any name of your choice, for example, investment amount. And here, the naming convention, which is commonly used in Go programs, is this camel case notation here, where you start with a lowercase character, and if you then have a name that consists of multiple words, the subwords start with uppercase characters. And the goal is to pick a name that describes the value that will be stored in that variable, so in that data container. You then assign a value with an equal sign, and then here the value could, for example, be 1,000. If we plan to invest $1,000 or whichever currency you might want to assume for your program. Now with that, you see I'm getting an error here that investment amount is declared but not used. And that's of course correct. At the moment, I'm storing a value here in this container, in this variable, but I'm then never using that variable and therefore that value. But that will of course change soon. First, let's store a couple of values. So we can create a second variable here, which could be our expected return rate. And that could be 5.5, for example, if we're expecting an annual return rate of 5.5%. Last but not least, I'll add a years variable, which should store the number of years for which we want to hold this investment. And that could be 10. For example. So with that, we have the three values that we'll need to calculate the future value of this investment. And as mentioned, later we'll get this from user input. At the moment, it's hard-coded here in the program. And therefore now as a next step, we can calculate that future value, which we can also store in a variable. Future value would be a fitting name. But here, I now don't want to hardcode some value, but instead, I want to store the result of a calculation. So what is the calculation that should be performed here to get that future value? Well, the formula for getting the future value of an investment is to multiply that invested amount with 1 plus our expected return rate to the power of years for which we want to hold that investment. So therefore here in our code, we want to multiply the 1,000, though not hard-coded like this. Instead, the idea behind storing it in a variable like this is to then take that variable and use that here, and multiply that by using the asterisk character, which is the multiplication operator in Go, as it is in many other programming languages. So multiply that investment amount with 1 plus that expected return rate, though here at least I stored it as a value that must be divided by 100 to be usable in that calculation, because otherwise 1 plus 5.5 gives me 6.5, and therefore here I want to use my expected return rate, so this variable here, and divide it with that division operator, this /, which you also see in many other programming languages, by 100. Now we'll need to add some parentheses here, just as we do in normal Moth, to make sure that this code is executed in the right order. Because I of course want to multiply my investment amount with the result of this calculation. So we have to wrap this here with parentheses. In addition, you see that I'm getting an error here, and if you hover over this here, you see that the error is that I'm mismatching types, int and float 64. So what's this about now?